We're going to go now. Gilad Erdan, the Israeli ambassador to the UN and US, is speaking in the UN.
4,000 rockets at Israeli cities over the last 11 days. Right now, as I speak to you, Israeli civilians are running to find shelter from Hamas's indiscriminate attacks. Here is a quote from the Hamas charter. Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it just as it obliterated others before it. And it continues. The day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. Now let me remind you of another charter, one that some of you seem to have forgotten, the UN Charter, which was formulated in the wake of the horrors of the World War II and the Nazi genocide of the Jewish people. The Charter of the UN calls to, and I quote, reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, practice tolerance, and maintain international peace and security. Sadly, in today's debate, we are not seeing a defense of the goals laid out for the UN, but rather an indifference to Hamas's charter, which, like the Nazis, is committed to the genocide of the Jewish people. We see an attempt to create a false moral equivalence, an immoral equivalence between Israel, a democracy that seeks peace and abides by international law, and a murderous terrorist organization with an ideology similar to ISIS that is carrying out the double war crime of firing at Israeli civilians while hiding its weapons behind Palestinian civilians, using them as human shields. This is what today's debate should be about. It is about who takes steps to support the values of the UN Charter and who takes steps to ignore the values of the Hamas Charter. It is about who is on the side of extremism and hate and who is on the side of moderation and dialogue. It is about who has the moral courage to support a democracy fighting radical terrorists and who has sunk to such depth of moral depravity that they equate between the two. Every speaker here today that fails to unequivocally condemn Hamas, that fails to distinguish between Hamas's war crimes and Israel's self-defense, that chooses to demonize Israel rather than supporting its heroic efforts to dismantle Hamas's terrorist infrastructure, is only strengthening extremist forces, encouraging terrorist groups to use civilians as human shields, and undermining the chances for peace. For years now, Hamas has held Israeli citizens and the bodies of our soldiers hostage. It is outrageous that you not only fail to call Hamas a terror organization, but you also refuse to demand that our sons are returned to their families. Mr. President, it is really quite remarkable. You know, usually, as we all here know, the UN works slowly, very, very slowly. It took the General Assembly a few months to convene a discussion on the fight against COVID-19, from which millions around the world have died. But when it comes to holding a debate to pressure Israel and give a terrorist organization a free pass, you were able to convene after only 11 days. What a disgrace. Is this what the UN was established for? Are those your priorities? These debates in the General Assembly are always characterized by deception and lies. So let me share some simple but critical truths. Hamas targets civilians. Israel targets terrorists. Israel makes every effort to avoid civilian casualties. Hamas makes every effort to increase civilian casualties. Israelis and Palestinians, by the way. Israel uses its missiles to protect its children. Hamas uses its children to protect its missiles. Hamas's rockets are indiscriminate by design. They have struck Jewish towns, Arab cities, and Bedouin villages. They have killed Jewish and Muslim Israelis.